Welcome to Misbehaving in Maine. I'm Dan Williams. This story is called Babysitting Psychopathy. And now, here goes everything. My childhood church didn't have new people. Yes, it had babies, but babies aren't new. They're just adorable growths dropping from the people we already know. So when Jim and Julia Turner came to our church, we marveled, for they were truly new. And they were a wonder to behold. Having received nutrition from areas of the country living in modern times, they were gigantic. Also, they were beautiful. She had long brown hair and boldly wore it long at a time in life when ladies were reeling it all in. He looked like an upright bass turned upside down, the instrument's neck split in two to make his legs. I'm just trying to say he was big up top, muscular, and I'm doing a wonderful job. They were so big, so beautiful, this couple. Many of us fantasized about the size and nature of their coupling. It would be dynamic, gigantic, of course, and dangerous for we the small folk if we ever got tangled up in it. A poem we knew helped us keep our distance. They say the pig will shift in sleep, rolling in dreams, and sometimes steamroll piglets flat by accident, and that is that. Wisely, we stayed out of their bed. Our brand new Julia Turner ran an antique shop in town. Our brand new Jim was a guard in Augusta, Maine state capital, a guard in a psychiatric prison, keeping his eyes wide on the criminally insane. The Turners lived out in the woods, so far out they were in the territory of the preppers, folks who stockpiled bullets and beans. You could hear the gun-toting folk shooting off big ones all around the house, and firing their guns too. Jim and Julia, at some point in their career of size and beauty, had come together and produced a man-child, Jimmy. Unlike his parents, Jimmy was small. That's why I didn't mention him before. He was so small, you didn't mention him. You didn't notice him. He was small and pale, and one of his eyes had a way of closing halfway, the lid fluttering, but only when he was deep in daydreams of death and evil. I never saw that lid sit still, never saw it open all the way. And I saw that lid a good bit. Yes, friends, I was the babysitter. In my 13th year, I worked for Big Jim, helping him hay his fields. He liked how I hayed. I tossed the bales like a bull in a china shop, if the shop sold men, not china, and if I had hands for hooves, and these tossed men were squarish, limbless, headless torsos completely nude except for suspenders. Because of how I showed the hay who's boss, Big Jim thought I might be able to babysit his pasty, microscopic spawn. So, I did. My first day on the job, I lost little Jimmy in that big old house of theirs. It was a house full from top to bottom with antique things. Everything had once belonged to people who were currently dead. The tables, chairs, and toys. All of it had been smoothed by passing through the long tumbler of dozens of lives. To sit in that house, to dine, to play with those toys, was to feel your own rough edges polished by the hands of the dead. In this mansion of warmly shining death, I hunted Jimmy. He wasn't hiding in the roll-top desk. He hadn't wormed inside the cushions of the pea-green chaise lounge, turning himself into a long maggot amid the horsehair stuffing, though he was certainly capable of this, and may many bald horses haunt his dreams. And he wasn't circling the drain of the clawfoot tub, playing dead and being dead for the fun of it. No, I found him out behind the house, standing in the shin-deep grass of their big yard. staring at the woods. He looked like himself, alien. I mean, he looked like the fleshy, spore-bearing, fruity body of a fungus, as plagiarized scientists would say, a mushroom boy swaying in a breeze that was not there. "Jimmy?" I said. He didn't turn all the way around with just his head like you're expecting, but what he did was close. I mean, it was scary. He didn't turn around at all, did not move except for his swaying, that dance-like waving of his body, a weed in a slow river, a Jimmy in the silent music of passing poltergeists. Because he faced away from me, when he spoke, his answer was aimed at the woods. "Yes," he said. "I was looking for you," I said. "What are you doing?" He sighed. The sigh a mushroom might make if forced to explain why it's growing on the throat of a murdered man. After Jimmy's sigh, he said, "I am enjoying God's creation." Again, because he was facing away from me, he could have been talking to the trees, answering a question of theirs, not mine. "Jimmy boy," said the trees, their minds reaching invisible roots through the air, all the way to Jimmy's ears, his thoughts. "When the police ask you what you were doing while your babysitter bled out from an accident with some vintage 18th century hand-forged scissors from Scotland worth $79.96, what will you say?" "I will say I was outside." "Excellent. Yes. Say you were outside when it happened. And what were you doing outside?" "I don't know." "Think," said the trees. Maybe I was looking around. I was looking at the pretty outdoors." "Perfect. But make it sound creepier, just for fun." "I was enjoying God's creation." "You're a dream, Jimmy. Now say it out loud. Pretend I'm the cops finding you out here. The cops say, 'What are you doing?' And you say, 'I am enjoying God's creation.'" "Oh," I said, thinking he was talking to me. "That's good. I'm just glad it's nothing creepy sounding. Good." "You know what else is good?" said Jimmy. "I recently learned everything dies. When did you learn death? And did it make you laugh when you learned it?" I laughed. Many times after that little encounter, my brother and sister and I would find ourselves in the dark with flashlights to our chins, filling our faces with ghoulish shadows, and whispering to each other or to ourselves in mirrors, "I am enjoying God's creation." Then we'd scream. The next time I lost Jimmy in that multi-chambered warehouse of ghosts, I didn't find him. He found me. I was taking a rest from searching, resting by standing before a massive painting of a fox hunt. I felt bad for the little fox. Poor guy. Chased by big fancy jerks on big horses. A little fox so out of place in a world of big creatures. But when I looked closer, I saw no fear on the face of the fox. What little beast isn't afraid of hallooing, trumpeting, galloping death? Mr. Fox, that's who. You sly-faced, black-eyed, red-toothed grinner, you. So maybe the fox wasn't being chased at all. Not really. Maybe he was leading the whole hunting company into a trap. A death trap, of course. "Little fox," I thought, "what are you up to?" At that exact moment, something touched my hand. It was either the cool, fleshy tendril of a fungus or the blood-drunk tongue of Mr. Fox. To buy time while deciding what it was, I yelped, whirled around, and there he stood. Jimmy. Jimmy staring at me, showing me the face the woods must have seen, a face clothed in a happiness I'd witnessed before, but only on skulls. Jimmy's eye fluttered. It brightened like 100 watts of electric death in a 10-watt bulb. I don't remember if he said, "Follow me," or just walked out of the room, then stretched his hand back through the doorway and curled his finger like a beckoning witch, likely cannibalistic, but I followed him. Out of the living room, leaving behind the eyes of the paintings and photographs which said, "If we could talk, we would scream." Next, I followed him through the entryway, where foggy mirrors stared at each other from opposing walls, creating dizzying infinities between them. And in those tunnels floated all the faces the mirrors remembered, faces melting in the acid of time, slowly slipping off the bone. Behold the smiling skulls. Jimmy crossed the porch, so I did too. The front porch, where a collection of rocking horses didn't move a muscle, but glared at me with warnings, as if I was following not a little boy, but a boy-sized bee. Enough poison to kill 50 horses and still have plenty left over for one more death. "Whatever you do," said the horse's horror-bloated eyes, "don't let him land on you." Jimmy jumped from the porch. The horses winced. He landed on the lawn, then ran for the barn. A barn full of cats so feral, they only purred while eating the stomachs of critters with high IQs, critters capable of begging for their lives. But Jimmy didn't go into the barn like I thought he would. He went around behind it. When I rounded the corner and saw him, he was standing with his back to me, just like before, the stance one takes while communing with the creaking, shadow-bleeding woods. But this time, Jimmy's head wasn't angled upward toward the exact height of wendigos and fallen angels. He was looking at his feet. "Jimmy?" I said, a little hesitant to approach, wondering if this is when he would attempt to brand me with the pentagram medallion he was heating up in his mouth. "Closer," he said. I leaned forward a little, which was closer, but not what he meant. He wanted me standing beside him, seeing what he saw, the thing he was pointing at with the toes of his shoes, little leather shoes, shoes the color of my skin. "Closer," he said. I stepped closer. "Closer," he whispered. Soon I was beside him, seeing what he saw. On the ground at his feet there stood a high gray pile of murdered mice. It wasn't a haphazard pile. Its form had been curated with care. Each mouse seemed to be placed, posed, the arms and legs either reaching for help or toward each other for comfort or toward the face of their merciless god. It was a handcrafted hill of death. It was an authentic pyramid growing in boondock Maine. Its outer walls were decorated with black eyes, and though it was dark behind the barn, the eyes caught and soaked in what little light they could find. They glittered, and the eyes had a song to sing. "Remember me as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I, as I am now, so you must be. Prepare for death and follow me." "Well," said Jimmy. "Jimmy," I said. What else could I say? "How about this? Jimmy, did you kill these?" A finger stretched from his fist like a guinea worm growing from a baby's head. He pointed at the barn. "My cats, they kill these." "Oh," I said, relieved, then not relieved. A person could only have this much success in mouse gathering if he was in league with the cats, the feral natures of man and beast meeting in some sort of understanding, an agreement. Why did the cats lay the dead at Jimmy's little leather feet? To praise him, the only human being they'd ever met whose life was as light as theirs, for he too refused to carry a conscience. Or maybe the mice were the cat's way of paying Jimmy for protection? But protection from what? From Jimmy, of course. We should wash our hands, I said, even though I hadn't touched the pyramid of mice. I mean, really wash them. How long did we stand there? I don't know. But I do know part of me is still standing there, still watching Jimmy watch the dead mice, as if he's waiting for them to... what? For them to be eaten by him, skinned and worn, coated in his saliva, mucus, and earwax, then molded into the shape of a boy so he could have a brother in his own image. Anyway, we eventually left the mass open-air grave, and I was scared, but not as scared as I would be a few days later when Jimmy showed me something much scarier than the mound of mice. He showed me himself, holding a sword. Sometimes swords pass through the hands of antique dealers who give them to the children they raised in the dark woods surrounded by libertarian bean fog and machine gun fire. "Watch," said Jimmy. We were on the back lawn again. He reached down into the grass that was about as tall as a decapitated head. Then he came up with the sword. You occasionally will find someone else's murder weapon in long grass, and that's what it looked like Jimmy was doing. But then he said, "It's mine." "Wow, Jimmy," I said. I only said this because I hadn't yet learned how to say, "Hey, Jimmy, you know mice and people are different, right? Like, it means something when you kill a mouse, but it means way more when you kill a person. This is something you know. I know you know it, but it would be nice to hear you say it. Would you? Would you say it, please?" "Watch," he said again. That's when he began walking toward me. It would have been scary enough to have him walking toward me without a sword, but he had a sword. And worse, he was swishing the sword all around in huge swoops. These were swoops big enough to make mortal wounds on whales. "Jimmy," I said, backing up, "that's far enough." "Is it, Dan?" said the wind and creaking trees. "Are you sure it's far enough? Are you absolutely sure? Let me help you find out." Jimmy stepped closer, still swishing the sword, and this step and swish brought the blade even farther forward, me-ward, plenty far enough. So far, in fact, the tip of the sword hit my arm, cutting my arm open. A little, but still, I was wounded. I looked at the cut. It was a hot, cold addition to my body, a red line with a heartbeat. My God, the red is blood, and the blood is mine. I say he cut me open, but it was more like a scratch, a cat's scratch, the scratch of 10 cats in a row, deepening the same line, making their mark on the posed arm of a young man lying behind the barn, cats blinking softly at their overseer, the boy standing just inside the woods, a boy glowing like mushroom flesh in moonlight, a boy with blackout eyes and a borrowed fox's mouth for his smiling. As soon as I felt the scratch and saw the blood, I looked to Jimmy, whose sword swishing had ended. He held the blade frozen in the air, and as he stared at my arm, my blood, he lowered the sword. It descended like the needle of an RPM gauge sinking into the red. They say killers with blue eyes can sometimes have black eyes while they're killing you. I used to think this meant murder makes the eyes change color, which is terrifying, but I've learned the actual reason now. Don't worry, it's still terrifying. The killer's blue eyes only seem black. This is because his pupils have dilated fully, opening so wide their blue becomes nothing but a thin circle, the blue eclipsed by bottomless pits. Why do the killer's eyes dilate so? Because Mr. Killer deeply enjoys what he sees his hands doing. He wants more. His pupils open as wide as the mouths of starving babies. His eyes seem to believe they might be able to gather enough visual information to make the high last forever. Jimmy's huge eyes stared at the cut on my arm, that little line of red light. When he finally spoke, the first thing he said was not, "Are you okay?" or even, "We need to get you medical supplies. Mom has a stick you can bite and a 17th century bone saw around here somewhere. That arm's gotta go." Instead, he said, "Don't tell them." It was an order. It carried the weight of a commandment. Weird. It was also weird that he'd used the word them. He was talking about his parents, of course, but wrapping them up in them was like tossing them onto the pile behind the barn. Not mom and dad, not people. Them. Them things. And you can do anything you want if you're doing it to things. Don't tell them. This isn't far from using the word it. "I had a fun time with it today," says Jimmy. "With what?" says his mother. "You know, the male one who watches me while you work late." Jimmy points at the babysitter who's still there. It. This story ends like life does, without great answers. Question: where is Jimmy now? Answer: I don't know. Did he ever get around to killing anyone? Not sure. Though I did hear a story about him throwing a rock at a teacher's head, so probably. Before Jimmy was conceived, did Big Jim's work with the criminally insane somehow soak into him like a humid cold, going deep all the way down to the genes, altering them, causing one or two of his sperms to go nuts, so to speak? And did Julia's handling of the possessions of the dead put a haunting in her head which found its way down to the genes too, making for a crazy egg? Unknown, because I never had the chance to ask them. The Turners left our church. They left our lives and we lost track of them. Oh, and I never told Jim and Julia about the cut on my arm. I wore long sleeves. Why? I wasn't a rat. I was more like a mouse, terrified of Jimmy, of what he might do, would do, if betrayed. And that's the end. Yes, this story ends with you and me looking at the back of Jimmy as he stands on the lawn, staring at the wild woods, communing with primeval darkness. He reaches down into the grass. His hand finds something there. Dead mice? A blade? He turns around and faces us. Whatever he found in the grass, he's holding it behind his back. Now he walks our way. His eyes are two black holes in his head. You can feel the pull of their draw. They're inhaling you whole. He smiles. He's closer now. We step backwards. What's Jimmy doing? He's closer. Closer. Our backs bump into a wall. The house? No. The barn. "Jimmy," we say, "what are you up to, buddy?" "What's that behind your back, old pal?" His smile widens, sharpens. Why are his teeth so long? Why are they red? He steps closer. "Hey, kiddo," we say, our voices trembling. "What in the name of God's creation are you doing?" Jimmy's eye flutters. The wind mutters. "Me?" says Jimmy. "What am I doing?" "I am enjoying the view." This has been Misbehaving in Maine. See you next time. And remember, you may be wicked, You may be weird, but you're not alone.